People engaged, it's time for Dueling Decades. The Matrix and Blade versus Bloodsport and Renegade. Strap on that cap, bust out the power glove. Come fight for what you love. Dueling Decades. Poop culture, popping pins, dropping hand grenades. Van Halen locked in Mortal Kombat with David Gray. Banner Ballet and Sick, Iron Maiden, GNR. Come fight for what you love. Dueling Decades.
We are broadcasting from the BioBidet Studios, where water does it better. Greetings, dudes and divas, and welcome to a special slobber knocker of an episode of Dueling Decades, the totally gnarly, awesome retro game show where we always train, say our prayers, and take our vitamins. On this week's game, our two teams will battle it out over the squared circle as we dive deep into the world of professional wrestling, as our teams will tackle an entire year for the very first time on our show. Let's take a look at those teams and the decades they will be fighting for. First off, representing 1988.
Yes, it's me. It's an interesting twist or turn or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be your heel for this evening rather than your judge. It's John Cross, and I'll be playing with the excellent team, Ashley Judd, Half Nelson.
And along with myself, representing 1988.
Oh, wait, is Mike not going to say anything?
Oh.
Mike,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead,
over to you, Chief. My co-conspirator is, or my tag team mate, sorry to keep it wrestling, is Mike. Go ahead.
I'm Mike Ranger, and I used to watch wrestling like 20 years ago. Perfect.
And I know nothing about wrestling, so this is going to be great.
All right, and along with myself, representing 1998.
Oh, yeah, brother, that's right. It's the Babalooks.
All right, guys, here on Dueling Decades, we need someone to hold down Law and Order. So, as a special added attraction, our special guest referee for the evening, Mr. Bo Beecraft.
Oh, yeah, tonight I hold your fate in my hands for the first time in a long time. I get to decide the fate of the 80s and the 90s. Yeah.
And before we begin our game, I wanted to take a moment to thank our growing community of fans of the show. Man Crush, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, that's right. Everybody on Facebook, that shit is blowing up. If you haven't already joined the group, join the group. One of the things we just put out, we just changed our logo. We wanted to make our logo come to life, and we think we did that now. And it actually has a mascot in the middle now. And these people are trying to name him from our group, and there's a poll up. So go over to facebook.com/Dueling Decades. And if you just go to community, you'll see the group there. Join it. Get your vote in. Tell us how much you love the show, what you don't like, which John will handle all those. And,
and I'll handle all negativity about the show and cut that shit down in its prime. Also, I urge everyone in the Facebook group to go over to our Dueling Decades store and buy my T-shirt, you assholes.
Yeah, that's
I want to see my cartoon face adorning your nipples.
We do have merch. We're doing a wrestling episode, so this is a perfect opportunity to bring up merchandise. And we do have quite a bit of shirts. I think we have like 12 or 13 different designs.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been asking about the new design. It's on its way. It'll be up in the store shortly.
That's right.
Hassle us, you fucking assholes. We'll do it in our own good time.
Do it yourself.
All right, gentlemen. Now, the rules of our game are quite simple. A coin flip will decide the team that goes first. The winning team will decide the topic of each round out of the 5 Dueling Decades categories. Although tonight, all of the categories will be wrestling themed. Those categories being movies, television, music, news, and, of course, hot products. The first 3 rounds are worth 1 point each, with rounds 4 and 5 worth 2 points apiece. The judges' ruling will determine who wins each round, and the team with the highest overall score after 5 rounds will be the victor. But more importantly than that, everybody knows that Dueling Decades is bowdy and rowdy. And if you ain't down with that, we got 2 words for you. All right, gentlemen, over to Bo Beecraft for the coin toss.
Yeah, what do you guys want to toss this week?
You got salad with
You'll never find the winner that way.
How quickly can you make it to Brooklyn?
As long as I don't get no sleep till there. Let's flip this 16-footer Stanley tape measure this week.
Ooh.
All right, it's
Boom, love it.
Hogan yellow.
Nice.
All right, now who wants what here? We're gonna go with We're gonna go with the logo side as heads, the clip-on as tails.
All right,
All
John
right.
Crush, you always do the flip. So why don't you call it this week?
This is exciting. It's exciting being on the other side of the desk, so to speak. I'm going to go tails. I want to see that clip pointing skywards.
All right, this is I should probably do this on the floor. I don't want this hitting me in the balls, so here we go.
Wait.
In the
I
air.
want it to hit you in the balls. So
It
do it.
is. It is tails.
Woo!
We are
All
Silver
right.
Side Up, which is the greatest Nickelback album ever made.
Mike, we're already on our way, Chief. We're already doing it. It's already a win. Let's
This
just
is
end
exciting.
now. Let's just end on a high
A
note.
3 count right there.
All right, where do you guys start?
Mike, where do you think? Should we start with our weakest or start with our strongest? What do you want to do?
Let's go with the weakest.
All right. What do you reckon the weakest is?
I don't know, man. I think the music.
The music? Music's got to be the weakest for all this stuff. All right,
I
go right
think-
ahead. You start off, dude, with your music round.
Okay. This is pretty incredible. So, hold on to your turnbuckles. On March 27th, 1988, at the historic Atlantic City Convention Hall in Atlantic City, New Jersey, Gladys Knight sings America the Beautiful at WrestleMania 4. The performance was in fact stellar. However, Gladys Knight herself didn't much care for pro wrestling. When asked how she felt about being at WrestleMania, she said, quote, "It's the Pips." Yeah.
Gladys, quite a pun meister
Wow.
back in her day. So that was Gladys Knight.
Gladys Knight.
Man, you guys are starting strong. I like
Yeah,
it.
That's
look
what
at that,
I
man.
thought.
Hey, listen, wait till you've heard mine. Honestly, this is going to be the greatest music round you've ever heard. This one actually is a bit of tricky, but please stick with me till I've finished. While 3 years earlier in 1985, WWF did dabble in album producing and released the wrestling album. In general, where music and wrestling collides is in the individual wrestler's theme or entry songs. Now, just in case you thought Hulk Hogan being a big old racist was the first brush with bigotry that has casually and barely plagued the world of professional wrestling, then you're probably not on this podcast. But just to put it in context, back in 1988, proving that people from South Carolina have always had an interesting relationship with the truth, large beardy wrestler, One Man Gang, decided to announce that despite being very much a Caucasian from, as I said, South Carolina, that he was really African and called Akeem the African Dream. This led to the controversial Akeem and Slick theme, a weird blend of soul, funk, and rap that would be catchy if it wasn't so generic and, well, a bit shit. Anyway, that's all that we've got. It's an entry theme. It debuted in 1988, and it's controversial. So I figured that's got to be worth something, right?
Wow. Yeah, it was a good theme, though. I was an Akeem fan, so you can't go wrong with Akeem the
How
African.
could you be an Akeem fan?
You model your look on Akeem, don't you, Mark, with the beard?
I really do. I do. He's a personal role model of mine. No, I always liked Akeem, and I thought years later when I realized that the gimmick itself was kind of a rib on Dusty, because Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, it was kind of just a way of poking fun at him. I even liked the character more at that point.
All right.
To each their own.
All around there, fellas.
But
All right,
honestly, to be
all right,
honest, although there were a lot of classic entry themes knocking about in 1988, most of them didn't start in 1988. Most of them were already going, once they got Hulk's was already going, and Dusty Rhodes, another like quality entry theme was going. So I tried to pick one that started in 88, and as I said, had a little bit of a news story controversy to it.
Definitely a good find. Just a
Oh, yeah.
shitty pick, but all right.
I had Gladys Knight.
Fuck you, dude. If it had been 1985, I would have had the whole wrestling album to play with, and you guys would have been sunk.
Mike, you're right. I forgot all about yours already.
It was a big performance, guys. People are still talking about it.
Yeah, Gladys Knight. Come on, who can beat Gladys Knight?
Well, that was the one at the end where Justin Timberlake ripped off the thing of her boob, right?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, who can beat Gladys Knight except, Mavis Staples, Aretha Franklin, Janet Jackson. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Anyhow, all right.
All right, man,
Mark,
Chris.
you want to start this one out?
All right, I will start this one out. And released October 27th, 1998, ECW, Extreme Music, the album. Unlike WCW and WWF at the time, all the songs on the ECW album were performed by actual big-name musicians and consisted of previously released metal songs and covers of metal classics done by metal royalty themselves, and originals by the legendary Harry Slash, who served as the in-house musician for ECW. The band Kilgore contributes a solid version of Pantera's classic Walk. Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden sings a soaring rendition of the Scorpions' The Zoo, and other major standouts from the album are a pair of Metallica covers, Motorhead's cover of Enter Sandman, and Phantom Lord, which was Mike Awesome's theme. That's performed this time by Anthrax. This album featured the hunk Sandman on the cover, and there was actually wrestler intros to each track in the liner notes. So that's ECW Extreme Music, the album, October 27th, 1998.
You know what's amazing about that pick is the fact that ECW went out of business. They're notorious for losing money all the time towards the late 90s. I think in 98, it's just where it kind of started, that slope started to go downhill, started to get a little faster in 99, 2000. But this had to contribute to that quite a bit, because how can you pay for all those names?
Yeah, I think they did it in conjunction with some record labels, so that there was some assistance there. But wow, being able to pull down, Lemmy, Bruce Dickinson, Anthrax. I mean, just the talent alone. Also on this album, you had White Zombie, and I mean, it's just a who's who of metal at that time.
But also a lot of those guys Lemmy and people had not been doing stuff since the 80s, like really.
Yeah. But
I know what you're saying.
They were the rock. I mean, these guys were icons.
Sure.
And then they were covering other icons. So it was
ECW, was that the one with all the barbed wire and bloodletting?
Yeah.
You do know wrestling.
Well, that's the one that's the wrestling I remember seeing. Was all the violent stuff.
ECW is fucking great.
Yeah.
All right. Shifting a little bit, kind of the same deal. Released December 19th, 1998. This album actually went platinum, selling over 1 million copies. It even reached top 10 on the Billboard 200. And the album that I speak of is none other than the WWF, The Music, Volume 3 by Jim Johnston. Not exactly the name that, Mark brought up with all the people on his album, but Jim Johnston did plenty of songs throughout the 90s, early 2000s. And to my knowledge, this is the best-selling WWF album of all time. I went through all the other albums, and there are some missing sales figures there, so I'm assuming that they didn't sell that well. That's why they didn't put it. And also, one thing here, The Rock's "Smell What I'm Cooking," right?
Right.
After The Rock actually dropped that line at WrestleMania 14 for the first time, and his theme music changed in May of 98 to open with, "Do you smell what The Rock is cooking?" And it stayed. But that was on this album. Between that and the glass shattering with Stone Cold, that's probably the two signatures that were instant crowd pops to any house show. It didn't even matter. You heard that first 2 seconds and that place blew up. But this thing had everybody's walkout music on it. Undertaker, Edge, X-Pac, Dude Love, Kane, The Rock, even fucking Gangrel was on it, Ken Shamrock. This one was crazy. The Oddities were on it because they were in the WWF for 2 seconds. DX was on it. Sable's music, New Age Outlaws, of course, Val Venus, and then the whole thing finishes up with Stone Cold. And I just looked this up the other day. Do you guys remember the DX song?
Yeah.
It was like a fake Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, fake against the machine.
Fake against the machine. I just happened to look it up, and that dude actually died a couple of years ago at the age of 49.
Wow.
Yeah, the guy that during WrestleMania 14, he actually Triple H props him up on his shoulders, and yeah, it's
they came out
pretty
and sang it live. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. But that anyhow, that's what I got. It is WWF The Music Volume 3.
All right, round 1 is done. That's music. Over to the special guest referee, Mr. Bo Beecraft, for the ruling.
This is a really tough call because the 80s, you obviously have some really pinnacle moments. You're talking Gladys Knight, who was one of the most illustrious performers in the history of Motown, certainly in pop music in general, WrestleMania 4. But then you have the wrestling album. I actually watched a short documentary on this the other day. You're talking people like Rick Derringer. Largely this entire album was produced by Cyndi Lauper's producer at the time. Cyndi Lauper, of course, had a lot of ties to WWF back in the day, which is just fucking bizarre to begin with. But to come off that album is Rick Derringer's Real American, which is Hulk Hogan's theme song. It's synonymous with Hulk Hogan. Racism aside, you hear that little guitar riff. That's Hulk Hogan. The crowd goes wild. So man, the 80s I'm leaning heavily towards, but then you have the ECW Extreme Music, which ECW is kind of known for just having shitty covers or sound-alikes because they couldn't afford the copyrights to the actual songs themselves. WCW did the same thing. Anthrax, Motorhead, Bruce Dickinson, those are all obviously huge cornerstones of the metal genre and everything. But then WWF The Music Volume 3, that was a tits album. Jim Johnston is pretty much like God as far as wrestling themes are concerned. He's created some of the best wrestling themes of all time. That was one of the actual first CDs that I ever owned, which I think says a horrible amount about me as a person. Probably the one that has the most scratches on it to this day because I still have it somewhere in this house. Man, that's tough. I think ultimately my decision is going to have to lie with 88 here, though, with Gladys Knight and the wrestling album is too.
No, hold on. You can't
okay.
The wrestling album did not.
I have to point that out. Sorry, I might have confused it.
Okay, yeah. Because
I'm sorry. The wrestling album came out in '85. I said if it was '85, I apologize. No,
by the judge.
My pick for '88 was the
Akeem the Dream theme.
The Akeem the Dream theme. I could have gone for the Hulk Hogan theme, which he was still using in '88, but I wanted to go with something that debuted in '88.
Well, this changes things.
I apologize for torpedoing my own team, but in the honor of fairness and whatever. You know.
But Gladys Knight is, still
Gladys
there.
Knight is still awesome. Yeah, Gladys Knight is still there. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the wrestling album, which was, as far as I know, the first musical album put out by WWF was '85, not '88.
Correct.
I want to be that clear. Sorry.
Well then,
I brought it up in reference to, not as the whole choice.
I'm gonna flip on this one then. I'm gonna award it to the '90s, even though the ECW Extreme Music thing wasn't that pivotal. The WWF The Music thing is, it reached top 10 on the Billboard chart. I don't think there's been any wrestling related musical event that's
actually
captured that.
4 was number 5 on the charts.
4 is another good one. I had 4 as well. As a matter of fact, I won't lie. I have the whole anthology, which is again says a horrible amount about who I am as a person.
I think 5 actually did the best on the billboards, if I remember correctly. I think
5 was garbage, by the way. That included a song about pie by The Rock, which was fucking atrocious.
Yeah. Yes.
However, Bo, I would like to point out that growing up, I always got points for being honest. So I just want to.
I will award you a non-competitive sympathy point.
Also, mine was controversially racist. My theme as well. So.
All right, your point has been deducted.
It's
going to the 90s. That's the final ruling.
Was racist.
Dueling Decades.